I'd like to welcome our host, Brian Dawson, Director of the Adapt and Clean Development section of AusAid, Australia's International Development Agency. Brian.
Thanks, Peter, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could make it along. It should be a very interesting evening tonight. I've got a great cast of speakers. They're very highly regarded in their field. And as Peter mentioned, they've just been here for the last few days to participate in a conference that we've organised in conjunction with World Vision, looking at water and sanitation issues. And one of Peter mentioned the different themes on this One Just World series, but it's an important means for engaging the public, informing the public about what different people are doing, what the government's doing. And tonight I want to just sort of set the scene a bit of where the government thinks we're going in terms of support for water and sanitation and some of the broader development issues. And you've heard the statistic about 1 billion people without access to safe drinking water. There's a whole range of different complexities, you know, whether it's most generally when you think about water and sanitation, you think of rural areas, but with the rapid urbanisation that's occurring in many countries around the world, there's actually a big need for provision of basic services in the urban areas as well. So we recognise within AusAid the change in emphasis of the urban-rural mix. Not that we'll reduce anything in the rural areas, but we also have to recognise some of the issues in the urban areas. One of the core focuses of the government, of course, is to address the MDGs, and most of you, I think, would have heard of the word MDG, Millennium Development Goals, which were agreed to by world leaders in 2000 at the Millennium Summit, and that's mainly directed at sort of poverty alleviation, you know, basic education, health services, access to water, a whole range of different issues and targets. Some countries have progressed pretty well towards those targets and are exceeding their targets already in terms of the time profile to 2015 when we're supposed to achieve these. Others are not doing so well. So obviously when we're looking at the aid program and structuring that, we need to actually target areas where lagging a bit and work at different levels, whether it's at the community level, the government level, and a lot of this goes down to basic governance issues involving both the international and domestic communities and working in partnership. And that underlines the sort of theme of the government's current push into water and sanitation. Some of you may be aware that the government's just announced that it's nearly quadrupling its money over the next few years. It's the investment it's going to make in water and sanitation. So there's roughly an additional $300 million being provided. And that is going to be spread across the various areas. We're going to work very closely with, and some of the speakers here are our actual partners at the multilateral level. We want to strengthen our relationships with organisations like UNICEF and the World Bank and the Asia Development Bank, and actually get a lot of basic services out there. But one of the things that underpins our approach is also to work much more closely with Australia's community-based organisations and NGOs that are active in the field, and we've actually established quite an effective dialogue process to help get some feedback from them about where, you know, what are the sort of investments we should make, where we should target. And that's helped shaped over the last 6 to 9 months as we've been developing this initiative. It's been very influential in developing some of the sort of entry points we're likely to make. So traditionally, East Asia and the Pacific has been the primary focus of a lot of our water and sanitation investments, but we recognise that both South Asia and Africa, there's a lot of people living there without proper sanitation services or access to water. So we're broadening our geographic coverage and starting to build up relationships and partners in that area. So we're taking a bit more of a semi-global approach, and I think as Bob McMullen, the Parliamentary Secretary, mentioned the other day, this is sort of the beginning of a much longer investment that Australia will be making in improving water and sanitation. So I won't carry on too much further, but I just want to introduce when we're dealing with water and sanitation, often in the past, a lot of these areas are dealt in a compartmentalised fashion. And there's a very complex set of development issues out there that affect not only the ability to provide sanitation services, but it's got to be linked to the education program, basic health program, gender issues, but more importantly of what's emerging on the climate change front. and many of the investments that have been done over past years are actually in jeopardy because they've been planned on previous sort of understanding of hydrology and water resources. And some areas of the world are actually going to be facing critical water shortages, so we have to factor those into our investments and climate-proof our investments. And it's just one small story I'll tell you. I was involved in looking at what will be the impact of climate change on the water resources of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. So we did some modelling with some climate change modellers and some hydrologists and looked out over to 2030, 2050. And look at all their irrigation investments they were doing, their sort of water security issues. And we found that, 3 of their major townships along a river called the Pungwe River, by 2030, in the low season, in the dry season, the water levels will be below their urban water supply intake levels. So, when we're looking at water and sanitation, whether it's at the urban or community level, we've got to look at also the resilience of these communities and the reliability of water supplies. So, I won't carry on any further, and I'm sure you'll be very intrigued with what our speakers have to say. They're all world-renowned in their fields, and I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.